Picture this, you're cruising down the highway, windows down, music blasting, maybe pretending you're in a music video, when suddenly, traffic slows to a crawl. Why? Because up ahead, there's a fender bender on the side of the road and every single driver feels morally obligated to crane their neck and get a good, long look. Nobody's helping, nobody's calling 911, we're all just gawking. This charming little human instinct is called rubbernecking, and psychologists basically say it's the love child of curiosity and survival instincts. Your brain's like, let me just check if that flaming vehicle has any lessons for me. Also, drama. Evolution-wise, it makes sense. Early humans who paid attention when someone else fell off a cliff probably learned, hey, don't walk near that cliff, instead of repeating the mistake. But let's be real, it's not like you're going to learn anything useful from seeing a smashed Toyota Corolla, unless you needed a reminder not to text your ex while driving. There's also a dopamine hit in play. Novelty grabs your brain like a toddler grabbing a candy bar. Disaster scenes are the ultimate novelty. They're rare, intense, and your body treats them like high-stakes gossip. It's like the universe is spilling the hottest tea and your brain refuses to miss it. So why does traffic take forever to clear? Because every driver wants their free episode of live-action chaos theater. Basically, your nervous system is rubbernecking for survival, and your nosy side is rubbernecking for fun. Bad combo. Now let's talk about the low-key evil part of your brain that gets a thrill out of other people's misery. Not in a mustache-twirling villain way, but in a thank God it's not me way. There's actually a word for this. Schaden-Freude. German, of course, because they've got a word for every oddly specific emotional crime. When you see someone else go through disaster, like watching a tornado rip apart a town on the news, your brain quietly whispers, wow, that sucks, but hey, I'm safe on my couch eating Cheetos. That contrast between their chaos and your comfort gives you a little psychological high. You're not celebrating the tragedy, but your nervous system sure is celebrating your luck. Think of it like checking under the bed for monsters and finding nothing. Instant relief. Except in this case, the monster is like a wildfire or a collapsed building, and the relief is you sighing dramatically while binge-watching disaster footage at 2 a.m. Scientists say this is tied to downward social comparison. You compare yourself to people worse off, and your self-esteem gets a temporary glow-up. It's twisted, but it's also kind of how humans stay sane. You're reassured you're not the one in the chaos blender. So yeah, you're not a monster for watching disasters. You're just letting your ego sip a little comfort cocktail garnished with someone else's bad luck. Cheers. Ever notice how disaster footage feels weirdly like a blockbuster movie, only scarier because it's real? Your brain actually processes disasters the same way it processes horror films, as thrilling but not immediately threatening entertainment. When you watch a building collapse or a hurricane swirl on screen, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, perks up like a cat hearing a can opener. You feel suspense, tension, even goosebumps. But since you're physically safe, your prefrontal cortex, the chill-out manager of the brain, steps in and says, relax, this is basically Netflix with worse lighting. That combo creates the bizarre pleasure of safe fear. It's the same reason haunted houses exist. You scream, you sweat, you clutch your popcorn, but deep down you know you're not going to be eaten by a demon clown. Disaster footage gives you the same rush, but with extra realism. It's like your nervous system is doing CrossFit, but your body's just sitting there with a blanket burrito. So yeah, part of why you can't look away is because your brain is secretly enjoying its own private IMAX horror show, except the special effects are depressingly non-CGI. You know when you say, okay, I'll just check the news real quick, and suddenly it's 1:37 a.m. and you've read 47 articles about floods, plane crashes, and a giant sinkhole in Guatemala. Congrats, you've been doomscrolling. Doomscrolling is basically your brain trying to turn disaster into Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all. Earthquakes, fires, asteroid near misses. Psychologists say this behavior is driven by the negativity bias, which is your brain's super annoying tendency to focus harder on bad news than good. Why? Because caveman, you needed to remember saber-toothed tiger, yum bad, way more than berries are yum. Survival beats snack time every time. The problem is that modern life has way more disasters than cavemen ever had to worry about, at least in your newsfeed. Your brain thinks it's prepping for survival, but all it's really doing is mainlining stress like it's a Netflix binge. The irony? The more bad news you read, the less you can actually do about any of it. You're not going to stop a volcano by refreshing Twitter. Still, the cycle continues. Disaster, dopamine, despair, repeat. It's basically a toxic relationship with your news app, and your thumbs are the enablers. Here's a fun psychological quirk. Disasters make strangers feel like family, at least temporarily. Ever notice how after a tragedy, people suddenly become besties in the comment section or donate to relief funds like they're Oprah giving away cars? This is called tragedy bonding. When you witness a disaster, even from thousands of miles away, your brain's empathy circuits light up like a Christmas tree. Oxytocin, the so-called cuddle hormone, gets involved, making you feel all warm and fuzzy about people you've never met. Basically, your brain mistakes watching the news for attending a group therapy session. There's also something called collective effervescence, which sounds like a fancy soda, but really just means everyone feeling the same emotion at once. Think of how a stadium roars during a goal, but instead of cheering, it's everyone collectively sighing at a hurricane. That shared emotional reaction creates a weird kind of togetherness, like being in a worldwide group hug sponsored by Mother Nature's anger issues. The creepy part? This bonding high is one reason you keep watching. Disaster turns into a social glue, and you don't want to peel yourself away from the hive mind. It's kind of sweet, kind of dystopian, like Facebook, but with less Candy Crush. Imagine watching a flood swallow up an entire town. Some people cry, some people donate, but your brain, it goes into, what if that happened to me? Mode faster than a toddler hitting a piñata. This mental rehearsal is basically your brain running a survival simulation. Psychologists call it vicarious learning. You observe a disaster and your nervous system takes notes like it's prepping for a final exam. Watching someone else lose their house in a fire makes you think, do I have a fire extinguisher? Should I buy one? Should I just move into a cave? It's a sneaky way your brain convinces itself it's staying prepared. Never mind that your preparation usually ends with Googling evacuation kits and then doing absolutely nothing. The point is, disaster footage makes you rehearse danger without actually facing it. It's like your brain is running a fire drill where nobody moves and the bell is just your phone buzzing with breaking news. So the next time you catch yourself glued to a disaster live stream, just remember, part of you isn't entertained, part of you is training for the apocalypse. Sort of, badly. Yes, that's a real term, and no, it's not what you think. Disaster porn is the media's way of packaging human misery into binge-worthy content. Endless slow-motion clips of collapsing buildings, reporters shouting in hurricane winds, drone footage of cities underwater. It's cinematic, it's dramatic, and it's strangely addictive. Why? Because your brain loves intensity. Regular life is boring. Emails, laundry, making awkward eye contact with your neighbor. Disasters are the opposite, raw, chaotic, high-stakes drama. The media knows this, so they crank up the spectacle like Michael Bay directing the evening news. Your brain, wired to crave stimulation, eats it up like popcorn. There's also a sneaky psychological mechanism at play, emotional arousal. When you're exposed to disaster images, your adrenaline and cortisol spike, giving you a natural rush. The same chemicals your body uses to run from lions are now being triggered by watching CNN. Congratulations, you've hacked evolution into a cheap roller coaster ride. But here's the twist, this constant exposure can desensitize you. What once made you gasp eventually just makes you shrug. It's like your empathy has a volume knob and the media keeps cranking it until the speakers blow out. So disaster porn is both the reason you can't look away and the reason you eventually stop feeling as much when you do. Creepy, right? Sometimes disasters aren't global tragedies. They're just personal, humiliating train wrecks, like that viral video of a guy trying to impress people with a backflip and landing flat on his face. You laugh, admit it. Everyone laughs. This is disaster on a smaller, more socially acceptable scale, slapstick misfortune. Psychologists say our humor centers light up when someone else suffers a non-lethal fail because it's the perfect cocktail of relief and superiority. Relief that it's not us, and superiority that we're obviously way too smart to try a backflip on a wet floor. It's also about timing. The brain treats physical comedy as a mini disaster with a safe outcome. Someone slips, you gasp, then laugh when they get up. That little roller coaster of tension and release is comedy gold. Evolutionarily, it might even teach you what not to do without the permanent consequences. Kind of like how kids learn don't touch the hot stove by watching Timmy cry after touching the hot stove. So yeah, even though we frame it as harmless fun, laughing at fails is just diet disaster watching. It's the snack-sized bag of misery that tides you over until the next full-blown catastrophe. At the root of all this disaster obsession is one uncomfortable truth. You hate feeling powerless. Disasters remind you that the world is basically a chaotic mess of bad timing and worse weather, and your fragile little body is just along for the ride. Naturally, your brain hates that. So what does it do? It tries to trick itself into feeling control by obsessively watching disasters. The more you know, the more prepared you feel, even if it's a total lie. Watching endless footage of tornadoes doesn't make you tornado-proof, but it convinces your brain that at least you're not in the dark. Knowledge equals fake safety blanket. This illusion of control also explains why disaster documentaries are so popular. You sit there nodding along, learning about fault lines or hurricane categories, and deep down you think, yep, I could totally survive that. Spoiler, you probably couldn't. But your brain would rather live in the fantasy of control than face the reality of chaos. So yeah, every time you tune into disaster coverage, part of it is just your nervous system clutching its emotional security teddy bear. Here's the grand finale. Humans are secretly in love with their own doom. Morbid curiosity is basically your brain's way of rubbernecking at the edge of existence. You know it's terrifying, you know it's awful, but you lean in anyway, like someone sniffing spoiled milk just to be sure. This isn't just about nosiness, it's about confronting mortality from a safe distance. Watching disasters lets you peek into the abyss without actually falling in. Psychologists call it terror management theory, which sounds like a bad corporate workshop, but really just means humans are bad at dealing with the fact that they'll die someday. Disasters shove that fact in your face, but instead of running away, you watch, because a part of you wants to practice staring down death without, the dying part. It's also why people flock to disaster movies, true crime shows, and apocalyptic fiction. We're rehearsing for the end, but we're also indulging in it. Disaster becomes a kind of dark entertainment, equal parts fear, fascination, and a sprinkle of, wow, at least my life isn't that bad. So yeah, when you binge watch disasters, you're basically taking your mortality out on a coffee date. Creepy? Absolutely. Human? 100%.